Welcome back to the 2 Pointers podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and we're going to talk today a couple of things really, really important. James Madison is the talk of the college basketball world, and I thought who better to bring on than first-time guest Dominick, and make sure I say this right. Is it Crosetto?
Perfect. You nailed it.
Oh, perfect. See, look, I normally ask these things. Bad on me for not. But also known as Sun Belt Syndicate. And then once we get finished with that, I'll be previewing the Charleston Classic. As I told y'all last week, I'll be in Charleston for 2/3 of that tournament because of travel issues and things like that. I won't be there all 3 days, but definitely excited to talk about some of the teams in there. I don't think any Sun Belt teams. There's probably some in the preseason or postseason tournaments. We'll have to look and see where they are. I know you've probably got a few of them memorized up here, so if not, I'll get them put in front of me. But there's definitely some really cool MTEs coming up, and I want to we'll talk about those obviously and where some of your conference's teams are going to be at. But I'm super excited to talk to you today. Again, JMU is the talk of the town. Obviously, they did actually, to most people's surprise, they did actually officially receive a ranking in the AP Top 25, which I'll be honest, I was surprised by it. So I guess I'll lead with, I didn't really have this question written down, but it just came to my mind. I've got a few things we'll get into overall about the Sun Belt Conference and just how fun it is. And obviously, we have a team in common here in the state of North Carolina that is a big part of it. But talk to me about what was your reaction when you, obviously, the AP was late today, which I thought was interesting, and I thought it was interesting that people were crying about it. I thought it was funny, but what was your reaction, and B, was it justified, and where, right?
Yeah, I think right now it can be justified. I'm a big proponent and fan of lots of movement in the early parts of the season, right? I mean, we take a best prediction, and we should be able to modify that, and the pollers or voters should be able to modify that quite quickly. As soon as JMU loses a game, they're probably going to be out. That's okay, right? Because, along the season, it's going to sort itself out. We don't have to get the ending standings correct at the beginning of the year. So this is fun. I think it's deserving as of right now. You beat the number 4 team in the nation, and yeah, probably a little overrated for Michigan State, as you mentioned on last week's podcast. The Tom Izzo teams are kind of famous for that slow build. But yeah, I think, if you watch the game, it didn't seem like a stroke of luck, right? They did have to go to double overtime their very next game, and really come back from the craziness of how they came back to tie that one up. They're just finding ways to win. And it's exciting to watch, and I think right now it's absolutely deserved to get a ranking at this point of the season.
I don't have it in front of me. It's officially 24th, correct? Is that right? I think it's 24th or 23rd.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's 23, 24, or 25.
Yes.
I would talk about my official poll this week, but as I told you off recording, and people can find out on Twitter if they like, but I left out 2 teams just out of sheer airheadedness. So we're going to pretend like that didn't happen. I did vote for the Monarchs. I know a few folks that didn't. I completely understand. Monarchs, right? Yes?
That's ODU. It's the Dukes.
Oh my God. Dukes. See, I knew the cool mascot with the head, and I'll put it on screen if I can remember in post-production, but
you got the state right. You got the state right. You're right there.
How many in there, are they they might be the only 2, right? Yeah, they're the only 2 in the conference in Virginia, right?
Yes, we do have Marshall and West Virginia, so it's pretty close. But
okay, all right. Well, look, this is why you're here. I'm not the Sun Belt Syndicate, so it's
also newer. Those are all new teams, so it's forgiven, right? This is like the second year, so it's new to everybody. There's people in the conference who don't even know everybody who's in it still.
That's a fair point, because again, if you don't do some kind of in-depth preview, or if you don't cover them on a day-to-day basis, and we'll get that ties into. I have a question about conference realignment a little bit later, more of an overview, but also ties to the Sun Belt. You mentioned the Michigan State game, of course. That's obviously a big reason of why they earned what they earned here. I think the Kent State thing, I think we should be playing a MAC challenge in some formality every single year. I love to see that mid-major. And honestly, I was very unaware of mid-majors having some kind of challenge. I know you have the ACC and the Big Ten had one, or Big 12, or who did we play last year? It was ACC Big. It was Big Ten, right? Yeah, because we played Nebraska. NC State played Nebraska. So, and then obviously you have all the ones the Gavitt games is going on as we're recording this. You have all those interconference rivals there. So talk about like what is this team made of? How did they? Obviously, we know Michigan State. Take the struggles from 3 out of it. How did they? How is JMU built, and how is it going to help withstand them throughout the year?
Yeah, basically, I think they're just solid all around. I know that's like a very vague answer, but if you look at it, they've got a little bit of the size. They don't have some extremely massive guy in the center, but they've got 2 capable forwards. They've got the guys who can shoot from outside, and they move the ball fluidly. They don't seem to have the struggles that some of the other Sun Belt teams do when they're trying to pass around the arc and get open looks. It doesn't seem to be much of a struggle, and when you're not struggling against a team like Michigan State, that proves that you've put the time and the effort in. And so that also shows that they have good quality coaching. And to note about one reason why this season has started this way for them is really how last year started. They were, through the first 5 weeks of the season, I think it's roughly 5 weeks, they were number 1 in points per game and point differential from last year. So yes, part of that was because they didn't have the hardest strength of schedule, the worst strength of schedule, but they performed well in those games. I think they had like 3 games early part of the season. They all scored over 100 points. So they just built off of solid, consistent play through all facets of the game. They don't just shoot the 3. They don't just go down inside. I mean, they can just really attack you from everywhere, and they've got the speed to hang with anybody. So I think, again, it was really a building block from last year coming into a conference that they'd never played in before. But, a lot of those northern teams in the Sun Belt were probably likely to come in there and perform a little bit better. Let's be honest, a couple of years ago, the Sun Belt wasn't a very good basketball conference overall. I'm not even sure who all was in it back in the day, right? Because it just was an afterthought for most people. I think these new teams coming in from up north with Marshall, James Madison, ODU are bringing a lot more recognition to the basketball side of things. I think there's still some growing to do, but I think you're seeing this new wave with a little bit more of a basketball focus in the northern schools, helping the conference as a whole, because the southern part, football is king, and so that's where the focus for the Sun Belt has been for a long period of time. And I think you're seeing an attempt to focus more on basketball, and I think that's paying off for JMU, who's obviously invested in a really state-of-the-art arena that can get very, very loud from the sounds of it. Have yet to actually take in a game there. But yeah, I think you're seeing a team and a program and a school who wants to be good. And so they've done all the other little things to make that possible.
Well, I think that's all perfect points there. Think about the way now. Are they free from the NCAA's grasp? Are they able to participate if they make it this year? Let me make sure I had that straight.
Yes. So football, they're under the regulation, but basketball, even last year, they could have been eligible for anything at all. So
I always get lost in those. The few I know for a fact, obviously, the Fairleigh Dickinson upset last year wouldn't have happened without one. I believe Merrimack was the result of that.
That's right. Yep.
Bellarmine, shout out to Coach Scotty Davenport. They actually filed. He announced on the ECB podcast. They filed the I guess I would call it a grievance suit, but they filed officially to have any school. I call it under the grasp of the NCAA, but we're gonna leave it at that. But they did officially file for a full blown dispute for all teams currently under that window in college basketball. So
wow.
I yet to be heard on what that happens. I'm sure that we won't get that answer by probably March 15th, but neither here nor there. I was just making sure we were on the same footing there. So I guess it kind of speaks to, are they currently, and obviously we're not going to spend forever on JMU, but are they currently for you the conference favorite? And then if they are, my follow-up question would be, what team has the best chance to be a second bid if they, God forbid, I know that you mentioned the Sun Belt being a basketball, building itself up, but let's say there's this alternate world where they do have a second bid and JMU wins. Is there another team that has that likelihood?
Yeah, I know going into the season, the coaches poll from the Sun Belt thought highly of App State. I've got to be honest, from what I saw from last season, and for those not aware, I am an App State fan myself. Before putting this together, I still stick to my fandom there. From what I saw last year and what I've seen so far this year, I still don't think they're quite there. But one team that I have been decently impressed with. I think they're going to have a little growing pains at the beginning of the season that they figure it out, but I don't expect Louisiana to fall off much from where they were last year. They lost Jordan Brown, who was a huge integral piece, and I can't remember where he transferred, but he did transfer out, so he is still playing somewhere, but it won't be in Louisiana, and that's a big loss for them. I know he has some NBA prospects, so he was trying to probably make himself a bigger target for them there and get to a bigger team than what Louisiana has provided. Although they did make the tournament and put a hell of a fight up against Tennessee before ultimately dropping that one in the first round. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's Louisiana. They took the conference last year tournament wise. But yeah, I think I still like what I'm seeing from Themis Folks, who's really stood out. It was more of a distributor of the ball last year because he had the big help down low. And this year so far, it looks like he's picked up the pace and he's started scoring himself quite a bit more. So I think it could still be Louisiana right there at the top for a second year in a row, essentially.
No, look, and Peyton, like we did a preview podcast with Everything College Basketball, and I mean he was elated to talk about Louisiana. So even with, and he brought up all the same points about the three main. And for the context for those, I'm using the magazine because the ECB magazine, by the way, you can still order it. It's ecbmagazine.bigcartel.com. For it $10 to get every conference preview. You can still take a look at, even though the college basketball season has still started. But he was elated to talk about Louisiana, and I have to take his word for that. And obviously, you cover it the same, if not more. So, I think that's valid. Obviously, talk to me a little bit more about App State because it's somebody that I didn't this year do it, but last year I wrote a preview basically of like a breakout player from every team, and some of the talent on there. Obviously, picking Donovan Gregory was probably too easy of a choice, but he's obviously got a chance to come back and have a really, really strong year. So let the fandom run here for a minute. Like, talk about App State and kind of what they're going to mean, because it seems like a lot of people, like you said, Coaches Poll had him second. Is that what you said?
I believe it was second. Yeah.
So top two, that has to mean something, right? But that, look, again, top heavy talent there wise with Donovan Gregory and some others. But talk to me about App State and what they potentially have a chance to do.
Yeah, I think they can build on what they started with last year. They went through a slump, I think, where they had like 6 games without a Division I win. Now, some of that was because they played, D2 or NAIA schools, but there was still some gaps of just kind of lackluster, well, probably offense and defense, to be totally honest with you. And I think that's been part of the fans' frustration a little bit, is like they want a little bit more excitement on the offensive side. But Kearns, the head coach there, has really got a system in place. I think it's just whether these guys are fully buying in and not kind of going off the script there too often. Because I think they can kind of freestyle really well at times, and then sometimes, for whatever reason, they're kind of going off script a little too much. But they've got the players in place to be successful. Like you said, Donovan Gregory coming back. They got Justin Abson down low, who's a shot blocking machine. He's kind of your stereotypical big. If you're asking me, is more of like a tall guy who's just not extremely athletic, but obviously just his length and his size is going to get up there and be able to block some shots. But he's no Shaquille O'Neal. He's not going to completely dominate on the offensive front of things. He's definitely got to work on his shot making ability and his free throws, just as most bigs do. But yeah, I think they've got some flashy players. Xavion Brown has really shined in some moments, and he can jump out of the gym. So it's just, how are they coming together as a team this part in the early season? Their first game, they looked pretty good. It was against Oakland City, who's in Indiana, which I hadn't even heard of before that game. But they trounced them. And so you think, okay, they look pretty good, but not great. And then they played in the Sun Belt MAC Challenge game against Northern Illinois, and it did not look good. So it was kind of the tale of two teams there for a little bit. And obviously part of that is the competition. But I think they have the ability to get to where they want to be. They just have to be more, bottom line, they got to be more consistent, is to what I feel like they got to do to get to that next level, which was kind of middle of the pack last year, about 500 basketball overall in conference and outside of conference. They've got to improve in the little aspects to make the bigger jump there.
So I'll just ask you, this is why I love doing this, because I tell you I have 3 questions about the Sun Belt, and then we record, and I end up with way more than 3. So here we go, off the fly. If we're going to pivot to football for just a second to make this question make sense. So
Okay.
I've been following you for a long time, and we haven't really connected until this podcast, of course. But we've been keeping up with each other and supporting each other. If App State, the famous clip of Luke Combs in Boone, all excited about that. I believe it was the Troy game, right? Like or maybe one of those games that y'all had last year was humongous, right? Slams his hand on the desk and he's like, I should have worn my Luke Combs hat now I think about it. But he slams his hand on the desk and he's like, this is a team that, it just like, I want to run through a wall and I don't care about any team in the Sun Belt. Like, I was ready to just like go out there and run to Boone. But he's like, this is a team due for Power 5 football, and da-da-da-da, right? And this was last year before a lot of the conference realignment stuff got nasty this offseason. If App State leaves, what are you rebranding? Do you have a plan in place if they make it to – is it going to be like Atlantic Coast? Yeah, see, I don't know. I'm terrible at names. So this is like, what's the plan? Is there even a plan? Like, I don't –
Yeah, to be honest with you, there is no plan.
Okay.
I have to be honest and say that I don't see them making that leap anytime soon. I know football is king, and they are still thought of as a brand, even after kind of a disappointing season last season and everything. But it's like other people say, you have to be well-rounded in just about everything else to really receive that Power 5 bid. And it's all about the money and the donors and endowment. And App State just doesn't have any of that. They don't have the big-time sponsors. They don't have the big-time money backing them. So if I'm looking as a realist, I'm saying there's almost zero chance that App State gets thought of as the next team to get in there. What did we just saw SMU essentially pay their way into the ACC by saying, well, you don't have to worry about paying us. We'll just take care of it. App State couldn't dream of that really level of money. So I don't see it, but there would be. I don't know. I'm falling in love with some of these other teams. Obviously, when App State's playing them, I'm not a big fan, but otherwise I'm always cheering for just about everybody outside of the conference to win their games. So I'd probably stick around to it. I got some merch here already. So, I want to hold on to that for a while.
Yeah, no, and look, again, that moment, on game day made me think of just like, they obviously football means so much for that university and just for what, the national landscape has meant for them. That'll also make me think about like, and before we'll get back to basketball, I promise, but thinking about if you were to, talking about how we're, newer teams, you mentioned Marshall and some others who, by the way, had, I got a chance to see Tavion Kinsey courtside last year at the Portsmouth Invitational Tournament. I will remember that for a long time. That guy is unbelievably athletic. Obviously they lost a lot, we know they lost a ton of talent.
Yes.
So, has nothing to do with my question. Just looking at the list over here to make sure I got my question right. So when you think of, and I ask people this privately, but I think your answer would be interesting publicly. So I'm going to ask you publicly, and I hope that's okay. Yep. There are people that I talk to in college basketball specifically that I think the brand of the conference, it means a lot to them. And you're one of those people. And I think that's important because I think with where we are in realignment, I think there's a lost love for like me, it's the ACC, right? Like I'm going to vomit that first game that State has to go to Stanford, and I'm gonna have to watch them for like whatever, like one of those weird Friday games, and for me it'll be like God knows what time. I'm just gonna be so upset. So if you obviously 14 teams, adding a 15th would be odd, but if you were to add a 15th team, a full program, think of it like, just you're plucking them out, right? You're bringing them over. I'm trying to figure out the best way to word this, right? Who would be that perfect team? Who would make the Sun Belt better? Who would make the conference more competitive? However this answer is shaped for you, and you probably already have an answer just based on the head shake, but who is the perfect team and why?
Well,
let me say school. Let me be clear on that for the realist out there. Perfect school.
Are you talking about basketball specifically or just in general?
I think in general is the way I framed it for everyone else. So I guess, but when I talk to people, the conversation is geared towards basketball. There's been some really interesting answers. I'll obviously keep, a couple of them private there, but like based on the context, the way I asked it to that person, but like, it made me really think like without conference realignment, like what would be the way you would do it? Like who would be the one brand? You're running the Sun Belt. What's the one brand, school, program, word, whatever word I'm going to insert there? What would be the perfect answer?
Well, I have two.
Okay, I love it.
I have two, so that, like you said, there's 14 teams. We'd want to go to 16. We'd want to have 8 on the West, 8 on the East.
Perfect.
So
I
that's
love
why I have
this.
two.
Love
But I
this.
have one very specific for basketball, and it's very easy to do this one. We do not have a all-out every year this team is going to be the favorite in basketball. Right now, we don't have that. It looked like it was going to be Georgia State for a time, and it's just not them, right? They don't have the staying power that is needed.
Well,
That team,
I think Coach Hunter walked out the door. I think that was
that's
a big
true.
loss. But yeah,
Yeah, Hunter and his son both leaving the program, and yeah, they've gone downhill since then. Now they're in the Atlanta market. They could come back at any time, but it
100%.
seems like last year and this year probably not going to be those years.
Also, one of
Brand
the
new
hardest places
facility,
to
though,
recruit
by
in
the
the
way.
country. Also, one of the hardest places to recruit in the entire country. So I think that's
Yeah,
obviously always going to be a disadvantage for them.
Yeah, which is weird, right? Like they're in the market, but like the kids that are in there that are successful probably want to leave. So it's like
It's every Florida school's problem in football. It's every non-Miami Florida State. Like it's every Florida school's problem in football. And even Texas State's a perfect example, right? Like Texas State is one of 1,000 Division I programs in Texas, right? They're competing for the same guys that Texas A&M, Texas, da da da. Anyway, so
yeah, yeah. So we're looking for that team with the staying power as far as basketball is concerned. Get that like big brand school that everybody knows and everyone's going to come buy the tickets for. Do you know who I'm thinking of? It'd be in the West.
That's why I love this question. I actually don't know. I'm trying to think like in the West. I don't think it would be a SoCon team. I think you're reaching up slightly.
We are. We'd be reaching up for sure. We would be.
I don't think it's Power 6 up though, is it?
No, not Power 6.
All right, so we're okay.
Well, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, this is. I'm never gonna get this, but I have a feeling it's in the American in some way because there's a lot of American teams in the same. Yeah, I did the American for the magazine. There's so many of those teams that just made the jump to the American that were on like that. Mid-major. Your definition of where they are in mid-major is totally up to you at that point. I think I have a feeling. I think I know where you're going, maybe, but you said they're in the West, which just means it's not going to be half the teams I thought of. So go ahead.
Okay. So for basketball specifically, I'm trying to get Memphis in.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I wasn't getting that, but no, I can totally, I totally see it.
And the reason is the Sun Belt is in the Sun Belt, right? But we don't have anyone in Tennessee, and Arkansas State's on an island, and Memphis is like an hour and a half from there. Jonesboro is, I remember I flew into Memphis. Yeah. And they hate
people fly to Memphis to go to Oxford, like Mississippi, for Ole Miss games. Yeah. Like people, it's crazy.
Yeah. So that obviously Penny Hardaway, just putting guys in the NBA. Again, a team that's going to bring people to basketball arenas in the Sun Belt. That's it, because not a lot of other schools that you would bring in are going to do that. So then the easy one in the East, which you probably already did have an idea on this one, is East Carolina. They're not going to bring.
See, that was my like poster child answer. I thought.
Yes. Yeah. So and people say, oh, because he's an App State guy, he wants the ECU in there. Well, yes, there's also that aspect. But Coastal Carolina's really close. Also, kind of one of those, not quite at the beach, but beach schools, kind of like Greenville is, right? Neither of them really at the beach, but they're very close. And ODU is not far either. And ODU and ECU played in baseball last year. It just makes perfect sense. It makes the travel for them cheaper, easier, faster, more regional. Their fans can get to more games than having to fly to Oklahoma to go play Tulsa and all these other, Temple in Philadelphia. Some of those matchups to me don't really make a lot of sense, and they'd fit perfectly into the Sun Belt. Now the money's not there, right? They'd be leaving money on the table to leave the American. So at this time, it's not going to happen. But in 2 or 3 years, when contracts get restructured based on what football can bring, because football is going to be the biggest aspect of that. And ECU's down in football. So maybe they say, hey, this is the time to make the jump when people aren't saying it's a step down type of thing.
They thought they were ready to go up recently. Like in the last 3 to 5 years. So, that's, it's a tough pill to swallow, I'm sure, if you're, the 80s name has slipped my mind. But, okay, so I guess a follow-up question. If you could stay at mid-major level or reach down and pull up, is there a perfect answer as well? I have one maybe, but I don't love it, and I'd love to figure out why.
Got you. So, there's 2 teams that were formerly Sun Belt members who a lot of people do not want back because of how they left the conference. That would include Western Kentucky and Louisiana Tech.
Yeah, let's
Um,
just leave them out for the bad blood purpose. But yeah, I like that.
yeah, that so I mean, to me, Western Kentucky fits a little bit better than Louisiana Tech,
Right.
La Tech, I guess, we call them for short. But part of me wants to see that La Tech, like Louisiana and Louisiana Tech really hate each other, and like
They did.
that would be fun. So I would want to reach for somebody who's instantly coming in as some type of rival or some type of like history. Luckily, we've kind of done that with Southern Miss, already, which kind of being right down there in the central area. Oh man, I don't. Other than those two teams, because I'm trying
Kennesaw
to think.
State is one that I thought just as like a maybe, but I don't know how much football means to them there. Obviously, basketball
Right.
recently they make one of the biggest turnarounds ever, and then coach up and leaves, and now they're probably going to be fighting they're in the A Sun, of course, but
Right.
I don't know. Just
Yeah,
thinking,
and
just a name there, but
yeah, and then and next year Kennesaw jumps up to Division I football as well, actually. So it's not a terrible fit. I think they're jumping into the Conference USA, I believe.
I believe so.
Um, so yeah, I mean they wouldn't be bad. I hadn't really thought about it. I think they actually have a pretty decent baseball program as well. So yeah, I mean a fit all the way around as far as like quality sports go wouldn't be bad. Man, I'm still trying to think, but right now I'll also say like the Sun Belt is made up of decent sized public institutions. So I would stay away
Yeah,
from any private school. I just don't think they fit. Like a lot of people were throwing out the name Liberty before, which I
right,
don't think Liberty has an interest in the Sun Belt anyway. I think they'd
right.
probably try and get higher than that. But even so, I just don't think that they really fit the mold of what the Sun Belt is as far as the fan makeup and the thought process. So I would stay away from the smaller private institutions like a lot of the SoCon schools currently are. The guy who I work with, Hunter, is a big Delaware fan, and he seems to think Delaware would fit well into the Sun Belt. And geographically, they're not as far away as it kind of sounds when you say Delaware. You think just like really
Yeah,
far up
but
north, but
they're
obviously
a
they're
mainstay in the CAA right now, though. I mean, they're like it. The Campbell just made the jump to the CAA. I get to see Delaware a lot now. Like it,
yeah,
I don't love that. How about I throw a few at you really quickly so we
yeah,
can
yeah,
get back to basketball?
yeah. There we go.
Middle Tennessee State.
I would not mind MTSU. I would be okay with that.
Okay. Obviously, most of what I'm about to say is going to come from the obvious region. Obviously, you have you have your Norfolk states and stuff, but I think there's a lot that would have to happen there to make those work. Obviously,
Yeah,
what they mean to the MEAC, like North Carolina Central, like what those teams mean to the MEAC as an HBCU is probably more important than moving conferences. I think Missouri Valley is probably too far west. Um, Ohio Valley, I think there's some teams like Tennessee State. I think at that point you're maybe reaching more than we think. I think
right.
the premier, bloodline you're looking for though is the SoCon. I feel like you have the same tier of. I know there are some private schools in there, but
Right.
like East Tennessee State, I already mentioned. Middle Tennessee is who I meant to say originally. Middle Tennessee is who I meant to say earlier.
Yeah.
UNC Greensboro. Again, you're going to have to get the football stuff right. That's going to be the hard part. The Citadel obviously
Right.
is going to be probably off the table there, but. That would pretty much. I was going to give you those handful from the SoCon. That was pretty much it. So
What
maybe
about
Chattanooga. But
Yeah, Chattanooga wouldn't be bad. Actually, that was actually some people have kind of thrown their name out a little bit as far as like a expansion member. Um, what you mentioned the HBCUs. What about NCA&T? They've already made the jump out of the MEAC and obviously into the CAA. Like,
yeah,
would
true.
that school make sense? Because they're a huge school. They don't have the financial backing, but
They
they
are.
have a
Yeah.
massive population for their school.
Athletically, they're about to get beat up in the CAA for a
Yeah,
while, so I think that would be my only fear.
that's
I
true.
think I picked them 14th in the CAA in basketball
Ooh,
preseason, so that doesn't help the answer. I think they were just behind Elon, so
okay.
yeah, I don't know. That's kind of that. I guess athletically, there's a lot more that goes into it than are you going to get the crap beat out of you. But
Right.
to be fair, but I think the Sun Belt's great, man. Like, there's just so many. Like, 14 sounds like a lot, but then it's like, okay, it's a fun conference. We know there's a history, like you said there, and there's obviously new blood there that's going to make it even more interesting.
Yeah.
We'll pivot back to basketball as we get out of here in just a minute. So I know, and I actually took, and I want to give you full credit for this. I did publicly last year, but I was like, look, this is what he said. This is why South Alabama is a sleeper. They're they're going to be a bid stealer, and you were right almost. Like, I mean, I think we're
Almost.
talking that game was pretty close at the end, if I remember correctly. If not, who cares? They made the finals, so whatever. South Alabama was obviously a very, very good team down the stretch there. Got to see another couple guys, I think, from last year in the PIT as well. Gosh, can't think of his name now, the big man.
Kevin Sam.
Yes. Unbelievable big.
Yes.
Who's this year's, I know it's very early, literally like super early, but who is this year's sleeper that, maybe not necessarily from I'm not going to make you pick the conference tournament sleeper now, but like, who is somebody that, and we'll kind of have to use Peyton's, ranking as a barometer, or if you have your own, obviously, as well. I'm sure you've made yours as well. Southern Miss, JMU, App State, Arkansas State is who Peyton has in the top 4 there in that order. Coastal, Troy, Marshall. Is there somebody on, looking at the ECB page, is there somebody on the right side? So from 8 to 14, let's just, be fun here. And I'll read them for the listeners' sake. ODU, Louisiana, South Alabama, Texas State, Georgia Southern, and UL Monroe. Is there anybody in that tier that is a sleeper, or was there somebody on the left, I guess, from the top 7 as well?
Well, I've got a few different answers. I'll try and make it quick here. Louisiana shouldn't be on the right at all. They shouldn't be in the second 7. But, they did lose some, so I can see the initial ranking there. Arkansas State being 4, they were much lower than that last year. I do think they make a big jump up. They had a lot. They were decimated by injuries last year. So I think they get some of those guys back, and they brought some talent. They always recruit well there in Jonesboro. Whatever reason, I'm not sure why that's kind of a place a lot of guys want to end up. But they care about their basketball there too. So I do think they jump up. But my biggest surprise, based off what I saw last year, would be Old Dominion. I think they're in a good area for basketball. They're grabbing really good recruits right now from what I've seen. And last year, in and out, every single week, every single game, they were in it. They didn't win all of them, obviously. They weren't the favorite. I think, let me see, 19-12 on the year, 11-7 within the conference. Not bad. But a handful of games go the other direction, and you are talking about this team being towards the top of the conference. And so from what I've seen last year with I talked about this with the App State team, the consistency was there. They just needed a few very small changes at the ends of some of these games, and some of it's just lucky bounces and not, or a questionable foul call, as we famously know from so many other basketball games that we've watched in our histories. But it's not just the players. It's obviously, when you're in every game like that, it has a lot to do with the coaching. So I believe that they have the coach in place to be successful. I believe they have the players in place and the system. I believe that Old Dominion should be challenging for the top of the conference as soon as this year.
Well, they're challenging right now, making you look even better live, as you probably looked over and saw it. It's 77-83 as we're recording this. Obviously, the result will be over in a minute and a half. And will obviously be plenty over by the time this podcast goes out in 2 days. But with a minute left in the second half, they're only down 77-83 to Arkansas at Arkansas. Yeah. Surprised Arkansas. Did they play Arkansas State this year? I feel like that would make loads of sense, but maybe that's just too simple. College basketball scheduling, I know, is very complicated. So.
Yeah, I know that there was like something about pods and all this stuff, so I haven't kept it straight with exactly how the scheduling works, to be honest with you. But I
just
think
look at it and have fun with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
77-83. It's getting close there. I think I guess my clock didn't update for a minute there, but there's 30 seconds left. Looks like Arkansas is going to pull it out, but I mean, it is. To think that 46-46 is the score in the second half is. I mean, ODU is showing that offensive power that you mentioned a little bit there. So,
yeah. And Arkansas was a 21.5 point favorite. So that tells you how much of an underdog ODU was going into that game. So they're performing very well.
That's a heck of a cover. I mean, granted, you just have to basically not give up 20. I don't know. Yeah, it's not. Look, it's impressive nonetheless. I think that a loss like that is honestly sometimes just as impressive as a win, where you're going to be putting up something like that. I don't really have anything else for you, so I guess in closing, I guess if I had to, and I don't know what happened to the page for the Sun Belt for the Player of the Year and all that stuff. Player of the Year, who you think wins the conference? You can give me, if the answer is different based on current day because of JMU's success than it was preseason, then give us the preseason pick if it is different. So player of the year and then preseason pick, and then we'll get out of here.
Oh, man. Well, I had JMU at the top. I don't know if I had them number one. I'd say I still had Louisiana number one on my list coming into the season until proven otherwise. I knew we had talked about this a little bit. Marshall was going to fall off. They just lost too much unless they brought in all these unknowns that we were going to be unaware of. But James Madison, with what their performance was last year, was going to be at the top. Louisiana is my team and my pick to win it, even so with what JMU has so far, because JMU started hot last year and then cooled off a little bit in the middle of the conference period of the season. So I think I'll stick with the Cajuns being up there again. As far as player of the year within the conference, it's going to be hard because I think Southern Miss has been decimated with some injuries, but Austin Crowley, I forget that he had a correction throughout last year with people saying it wrong, but he's one that, I would really look out for. Themis folks up there down there really in Louisiana. And then, I mean, if JMU continues the run, I think you've got to look at, Terrence Howard or Noah Friedel.
Okay.
I'd probably pick Terrence Edwards over him, over Noah at this point. Yeah. But if they're, it's always like you pick the good players from the best team, right? I mean, I don't love that because sometimes the best players on one of the worst teams, but we know how it goes. And so if they continue a run like they've got on now, I believe you're going to see a lot of people thinking that it's a player from James Madison. And it may be deservingly so at that point. But right now, I'd still give it to Austin Crowley with what he had done last year and coming into this season. But I do expect Southern Miss to struggle with the injuries that they have coming into the season.
I'm going to give a quick shout. You mentioned ODU. Chounce Jenkins, top scorer from last year for ODU as well.
Yeah.
I think if he can continue that scoring prowess and they have a year that you seem to be as a sleeper could predict there, I think he has a good shout there. Really quick, not really a question, but just kind of hitting the MTEs. As I mentioned, the second half of this pod will be previewing the Charleston Classic. Just quickly scrolling through blogging the brackets. They've got all the tournaments in front of here. Coastal obviously is the host school from the Myrtle Beach Invitational. To say that they have a strong chance of getting out of that, this is a rough slate, I'll be honest with you. Furman, Wichita State, St. Louis, and Charleston, all teams that I have slated to be, just a bloodbath at the top of that. The Shriners Children's Charleston Classic is where I'll be. No teams there. I'm just scrolling there quickly. I don't think there's any more that I'm missing there. The U.S. Virgin Islands Paradise Jam. Nope. A couple ASUN teams. And I think that's it. There's probably, of course, there's something I'm missing, obviously, but there's all these smaller ones for non-con that I may be missing as well. But
when I think before we were recording, you were mentioning the Sun Belt MAC Challenge, or maybe even already in the show. I can't remember off the top of my head.
And that was more regular season based. And I think what's the standings there? I think I had a screenshot I was going to mention to you, but I forgot now. But
so currently, because and I don't know if you know, they're going to redo the second part towards the end of the season, but currently the MAC leads 7-5.
Oh, so it's close. Marshall's playing in the Cayman Islands. That was the other one I had mentioned or missed. Against Utah State. Drake is going to be in that one, which is really good. Ooh. Tucker DeVries. Akron's another good shout there. Oakland. And I believe that is actually at this time. Nope, it's not. It's not. The Jacksonville Classic. Jacksonville's going to be playing. Looks like Southern Miss is playing in this one. I got that right. As long as that's the right logo. I'm quickly scrolling without. Yep, Southern Miss. Yeah. So I think I'm actually caught up on that. There's so many of them, it's ridiculous. There's literally just this whole weekend. It's like what they call it, the turkey tournaments or whatever. Like just a ton of them, and I definitely missed some at some point. But anyway, on the way out, before you get plugs in, I did tell you to prepare a player of the year that wasn't a big, because I ask everybody this, and I didn't want you to prepare and then not ask you the question. So quickly, if the player of the year is not Zach Edey, Hunter Dickinson, and others that are a big, who is a good shout? You can use the first week of games that you might have watched as obviously good research there. But if the player of the year award nationally is not one of the five bigs that are pretty obviously the unanimous five there, who is a good shout for you? And then plug away and we'll get out of here.
All right. Didn't Caleb Love play here kind of locally in the ACC, or am I thinking of somebody else with the
North
last
Carolina,
name Love?
yeah, yep, North
Okay,
Carolina,
so he's at Arizona now, right?
yep,
So
and had an okay game to upset Duke, of course, the other night. So
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So it's like, if there's somebody possible, I'm a little more familiar with his game, so
yeah,
I'm probably gonna lean towards somebody I've seen and kind of know a little bit better just because of the
of course.
local vibe. Um, Man, yeah, let me just go with Caleb Love. I mean, I keep looking at his name. I can't look away from that one. And again, it's probably the familiarity playing too much into my mind, but I'll stick with that pick.
That's good.
Before the college football season started, I just kind of kept looking at Florida State, Florida State, Florida State, and that one's worked out pretty well. So I'm going to do the same thing with Caleb Love here.
It's a good point. Let people know where they can find you. All the social medias and stuff, of course, it'll always be linked in the description below as well. Let people know where they can find you, the kind of work you've been doing as well. And I appreciate definitely your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me on, Trevor. It's been a pleasure. Listening to you and then getting to actually be on your pod as well is awesome. So I'm doing some work with the people that are watching on College Football Dogs, the sign behind me, a little bit of some writing here and there, and then a podcast as well, known as the Sun Belt Syndicate. And the easy thing for social media is it's Sun Belt Syndicate everywhere. So just the one simple plug, and you should be covered across the board there.
For you Sunbelt fans and you want to catch any basketball, I know there's some football remaining as well. Don't forget $20 off your first purchase, code 2pointers, SeatGeek.com. Link in the top of the description will take you there. You'll get a great view of your seat before you even go, which would be really nice. A lot of really awesome arenas, like you said, a lot of new arenas as well. JMU's place, for those of you near the what's the town again? Harrisonburg. I almost said Lynchburg, and I knew that wasn't right. If anybody near any of those big Sunbelt towns there, $20 off your first purchase, SeatGeek, link in the top of the description. Thanks again for being on. We greatly appreciate the time. Look forward to talking to you again. Obviously, probably a little bit closer to tournament time once we know a little bit more about these teams, of course. All right. Hope you enjoyed the recording there, talking about James Madison with Dominick, a.k.a. Sunbelt Syndicate. We're going to wrap up here quickly. Before we do, let's talk a little bit about the Charleston Classic. I'll be in as you're hearing this, I guess Wednesday, if you're listening to it Wednesday morning. I'll be in attendance from Friday's games. Saturday is the day off there in Charleston, and then Sunday I'll be there for every game from Friday to Sunday. I'll be watching Thursday from home before I make the drive down early Friday morning. I want to talk through the schedule of this tournament. This is one of the better tournaments, I think, or I guess MTEs as they're called so famously right now. But I'll be talking through some of these games. I've got some pointers that I want to make, pun intended, about some of these teams that I'm looking forward to seeing. Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, if you have a chance to watch while you're at work, if you are for some reason not working on a Wednesday or Thursday in the middle of the day, check this game out, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. I believe all of these games will be on ESPN2 or ESPNU until late Sunday for the championship game. St. John's, who, as I'm recording this, has lost to Michigan at home in Rick Pitino's home opener in the Garden. Michigan dominated that game pretty much through and through. I think counterparts would maybe disagree with that, but North Texas is a sleeper team, I think, in this tournament as a whole. Obviously, they're going to have some matchups bounce their way depending on which direction. They've got a really tough second game based on who I'm going to pick, at least in just a moment there. St. John's and North Texas. North Texas has a stout defender in Aaron Scott, who's been really, really good for them offensively as well so far to start the year. They also have Ross Hodge, head coach in his first year, taking over for McCaslin, I always get his name messed up, going over to Texas Tech there. Their defensive identity came from Ross Hodge, so I don't see their defensive prowess not changing. This game is very close in KenPom rankings as well. The St. John's Red Storm are 74th, and North Texas is 88th. I am not going to overreact, however. I think North Texas's depth is not super strong. I picked them 5th to finish in the American, and what I think is still a very, very good American conference. But I think this is a get-right game for St. John's. I think they get it going offensively despite against a tough defense, and then I think they move on. Their Friday game or semifinal game will be at 2 p.m. on Friday. Looking forward to seeing Rick Pitino coach. I believe for the first time, I may have caught one of those Louisville games when I was younger. Here in Raleigh, maybe, but I'm just going to call it my first time seeing him coach up close and personal. Mentioning they had a tough second game. Dayton and LSU. LSU had a tough one against Nichols at home on Friday, November 10th. They did lose that game 66-68. This is not a good LSU team, especially with the likes of Jalen Cook not being active with NCAA. I think this will be his third transfer. So regardless of what it is, he's not there. So I do think this is going to be a tough game for the Tigers to win. Love Deron Holmes on the other side. Also shooting threes now, apparently, for Dayton. Dayton did lose some really key pieces in the transfer portal as well. But I think Dayton is in a position to win this game, and I think win this game pretty comfortably. I do really like Dayton. I didn't do a ton of A10 research and prep there, unfortunately, for the sake of this prediction, but I think Dayton's got the team, and I'm going to pull up their roster just to see if there's any other notes that I'd like to make here, but Dayton is a really, really solid squad, and I think the favorite right now, or one of the favorites in the A10, I know Duquesne is up there with some others as well. Again, Deron Holmes being a difference maker there. They're 35th in the country in 2-point defense and their 2-point percentage defense, and then they're 58th in the country in 2-point offense. So super efficient and strong on both ends there. They're making their free throws. They're top 31 in the country there. Northwestern, that game was tough for Dayton. They probably could have pulled that one out there, 71-66. That one's at Northwestern. They then have to go play Youngstown State here on Friday, November 24th after this tournament. That'll be their first game back after the MTE here in Charleston. All in all, Javon Bennett, Kobe, Elvis are probably going to have to be really, really efficient again from the free throw line as they've been getting to the line there. I think Dayton, this is just a solid Dayton team. I know Malachi Smith is now out for the year, I believe, with an ankle injury is what it seems like. So I think that definitely is going to hurt them. But at least in this game, I do believe that Dayton will get the victory over LSU. Next couple games here, what I'll do is I'll just kind of pick the likes of the bracket going through, and then I'll kind of give you my champion. I'll be quick on the second matchups there. I'll be short and sweet. Houston's the second highest team rated in KenPom. They're a top 6 or 7 team in most polls. I voted them in the top 6, I believe, in my poll for ECB as well as for House of College Hoops. Houston, has not played exactly any stellar competition. They've played Louisiana Monroe. They play Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and Stetson. No one there ranked better than 237 in KenPom. They have Towson here, and I think Towson is a really good team in the CAA. I had them picked there in the top 5, as most did. I believe 3rd, if I remember correctly, if not 4th. I think Houston handles this team pretty easily with the likes of Damian Dunn, Emmanuel Sharp, LJ Cryer, and Jamal Shedd are going to have unbelievable games, I believe, throughout this tournament. A guy that I think will be really, really important for them, not only in non-con, but as the season progresses. I got to see up front last year, Terrence Arsenault. I think he's going to be really, really good, step into his role as a two-way player. I think he'll be very, very important for this team, specifically in a game that I think Towson if they shoot the lights out like they should, maybe it's competitive, but Houston is going to, I think, take care of Towson pretty easily. I know I guess technically I've gone chalk there. It depends on what you would think about Dayton LSU. Don't think it really matters. Utah and Wake Forest is an interesting one because this is the nightcap on Thursday night, 9 p.m. As soon as that game goes tip, I go to bed. Or as soon as that game goes final, I go to bed. I have to be up at 5 a.m. to make the drive to Charleston the next morning. Utah, Wake Forest, I'm obviously, I've made it very clear what I think about Wake Forest. I think they're going to be a sleeper in the ACC, have a chance to win the ACC tournament. It's kind of a hot take I had coming into the year. Utah, though, has looked impressive. They're 34th in KenPom, deservingly so. They have the 3rd best block percentage in the country. They are strong defensively, led by Hunter Erickson and Gabe Madison. I haven't watched enough of Utah to really make a difference maker here in this decision. I believe Wake is still waiting on Efton Reed's waiver decision, which is ridiculous. It's even taken this long if he has or hasn't played. And I'll make sure I am not crazy there. I'll give you the right answer right here live while I'm recording, just to show you how I didn't have everything perfectly prepared here. Right, Efton Reed, has he played yet? He has not. So has not registered a minute yet. So need to get that worked out with the NCAA. I know that they're going to be without Damari Monsanto until early December, so he will not be in this game, which will hurt Wake Forest's shooting. They've got to get some things going in the front court with Mayer and others, but I think I'm going to go. This is tough because I really like Wake, but I don't think this is the Wake team. Like, I think this game is less important for Wake than it is for Utah, because Utah's in a really good stretch here where their season starts to get really hard really quickly. They play St. Mary's on November 27th. After this tournament concludes, they go and play Hawaii, Southern Utah. BYU is a really tough game for them there. Utah Valley, Bellarmine, Washington State, and actually from then on it is all Pac-12 play from then on. So Utah's got a really tough schedule this year. The Pac-12 I think is going to be solid, and then they've got some really strong games specifically against Wake, St. Mary's. I mentioned BYU, Bellarmine, all really tough squads there. So I think I'm going to go Utah. I think it's a really, really close game. I think it's a defensive battle. I just think this Wake team is not ready, and I know that would look like a blip on everything I've said for 1-3. But Wake's played Georgia in this time span. They've played Elon was obviously they were down 20, and then they end up winning by 20. I think the first time either ever or in the last 15 years that's happened. They'll play Charleston, Southern, Florida, and Rutgers. I'll be in attendance for both those games in Winston-Salem. So I think this is just a quick, 1-2 there to start the year. I think it'll be really, really tough for them, but I think they'll be able to learn from it and understand how they can improve. Obviously, I think health is going to be a big deal for them, relying too much on Cam Hildreth. So I don't overreact to the 1-2 start if Wake loses this game to Utah. They've obviously got some strong wins they'll be able to put up here going into the consolation part of the bracket. I will go Utah in a very close game. Lastly, getting into the semifinals, I picked St. John's in the first one, Dayton in the second one, so those two would go head-to-head. With Malachi Smith's injury, I'm going to go with St. John's, even if they're still figuring things out. This is a really deep team. This is a really tough team. Offensively, I think that, again, if they get that get-right game ahead of them with North Texas, I think they can easily handle Dayton. Houston, I had picked, and then Utah. I think that game's going to be a lot tougher and a lot closer than I think people think. I'm going to go chalk here again. I'm going to pick Houston over Utah for the obvious reason. I think Houston's just way stronger offensively, despite what I think Utah is in the front court. And then that would put us on Sunday at 8:30 p.m. Again, I believe that's ESPN tip there. Since football will be on CBS or NBC that night, ESPN is going to get a nice game there. I'm going to pick with St. John's and Houston playing each other. I'm going to pick Houston. I know that this tournament is important for Houston to get right and kind of head their season off into a really, really strong first year in the Big 12. So they're going to need every bit of momentum. Obviously, the Big 12 is also one of those things where it's a bloodbath. Teams are going at each other. Teams are beating each other up. I think this is a really good chance for Houston to kind of get themselves started. Obviously, the American, one of the knocks for them was that they didn't play anybody other than Memphis. So, their first real quality test was if they didn't have any great non-cons, like they have started the year off without. Is they played Memphis in late February, and then even the last game of the American season before the tournament there, and then they would obviously probably play Memphis again in the American tournament. So what the biggest knock on them was were they tournament ready, right? Were they caliber tested for the team that they're going to see, or the variety of teams they're going to see? Their potential matchups in this, obviously they play Towson, who's a really solid CAA team with a prolific offense. They would see a really tough Utah team, again, defensively, versatile in the front court there. Wake would obviously give them a strong challenge. Dayton has some flexibility if they get into the championship game, of course, but North Texas, St. John's, one of those teams could make the championship game and be a tough opponent for Houston. I think this is a really quality MTE. This is a really, really awesome tournament where we see a lot of teams that have a lot of different things going for them. LSU kind of being the exception to that there, struggling to start the year, but I do think they have a chance. Any team in this tournament has a chance in any of these games. I'm going to go chalk, though. I am going to pick Houston over St. John's, and then we see at least St. John's make the championship of this tournament, which will be exciting, which will, I think, simmer some of the doubt after that Michigan game. I think I was just wrong on Michigan coming into the year. I think they're good. I think this is a team where sometimes addition by subtraction, you lose a lot of guys that didn't gel together. Hunter Dickinson and, some of the guys, having guys that go into the NBA draft and, thinking about what those guys meant, Jet Howard, Kobe Buffkin, right? Like those guys should have probably won games more than they did, but I think they were just more good individual pieces, more less than a team together. The floor spacing was really good though, so I don't really understand, maybe some of that fit there. Michigan fans, shout out to G Wizzy, or Greg Waddell, for him. I keep up with Michigan, through him at least, I guess. Nonetheless, rambling there, but want to give you guys a good hour podcast today. We went really, really long with Sun Belt Syndicate. I say long. We went 10 minutes over what I asked him to. I'm grateful for his time. Talked a lot of really cool stuff about James Madison, some sleepers there in the Sun Belt. Who could be a bid stealer? If James Madison, could they run the table? I forgot to even address that with him, how possible that is. But, I think JMU's in a really cool position where they have some really tough non-cons. They obviously will have a potential game later against New Mexico, depending on how a Fresno State-New Mexico game goes and one of these MTEs coming up. I think James Madison could do it. I think they could run the table, and I think it'll be really interesting to see. I hate that I forgot to mention that with him. I'd brought it up on previous shows before, both here and ACB as well, so it has been said. Looking forward to Charleston. If you're going to be at any of the tournaments, want to get in there, get $20 off your first purchase with SeatGeek. You'll be able to get that with code 2pointers. Link in the top of the description. Don't forget, $20 off your first purchase. Ton of football going on, ton of hockey, ton of basketball, of course, as we're always going to be talking about here primarily. We want to be able to get that to you. $20 off your first purchase, code 2pointers, and it does help support the show. We greatly appreciate it. If you're wondering where a lot of my research came from as well, just talking about some of these teams, how I prepared myself for the season, of course, ecbmagazine.bigcartel.com. The magazine is still available for sale. Just $10 gets you almost 300 pages of really great information, previews of every college basketball team in the country to have you ready for March here in a couple of months. I know that sounds crazy. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. This has been the 2 Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and I'll see you in Charleston.